Okay, just in the interest of time here, we're going to get started. Again, the Google Doc that is on Classroom labeled uh, March 31st Zoom notes. You're going to want to have that up. And it is basically, and again, it says March 31st Zoom notes. It's under assignments 329 through 42, air review week 3. Okay, so if you have that up, that's going to help. Again, it is a Google Doc, has a chart. We're going to go through that here in a second. So I'm going to share my screen. And again, as you can see, it was right here under assignments, March 31st Zoom notes. Click on that. It brings this chart up. Okay. So again, our job today is to quickly go through and just kind of do some basics over the Ohio Constitution and in local government, specifically to explain the concept of federalism a little bit better and give you kind of a quick and easy lesson over how to differentiate between them, because the air test tends to like to throw a chart like this at you and have you fill it out or kind of fill in the blanks or maneuver things around as it typically does. So just filling out this chart alone can help you to at least answer a couple of the questions, and the activity will kind of drive home the point here in a second. So if you remember from our studies of the 3 branches of government, there are 3 branches to the United States government, and in federalism, there are 3 levels: national, state, and local. The legislative branch does one specific thing, and that is, and again, I always like to remind students, they make the laws, okay? So again, you have this chart. Filling out this chart gets you quick and easy credit. So again, kind of have this up and at the ready. But the legislative branch makes laws. The executive branch enforces the laws. So once the laws take effect, they're the ones that make sure that they get followed, okay? And then finally, the judicial branch interprets. They tell us what the laws mean. They determine, how long somebody serves a court sentence. They determine a great deal of things, quite honestly. Okay. So again, there are 3 different levels and they all do different things. Legislative makes the laws, executive enforces the law, and the judicial branch interprets the law. All right. So to understand that at a national level, the people that make the law at the national level are Congress. Okay. Congress makes the laws. Now, Congress is split into the House of Representatives and the Senate. So 2 houses. Remember, we have a bicameral legislature, which means 2 houses. Okay. Bicameral house, 2 houses. Okay. House of Representatives and the Senate. They're the ones responsible at the national level making the law. Okay. Telling us what laws will actually take effect. Now, once they pass the law, the people that are responsible with enforcing it are the president and the cabinet. They're the ones that carry them out. Now, the president, obviously, Joe Biden's in charge of the national government. If Congress passes a law, it's his responsibility to carry it out. Now, the cabinet helps him to do that. Now, who are the cabinet? They're his series of advisors, but they run the branches or the bureaucracy within the executive branch. So they run, the State Department, the Treasury Department, the Department of the Interior, the Education Department. And again, they are secretaries. So Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury. The Justice Department is run by the Attorney General. They're all nominated by the president and then confirmed by Congress in order to run these departments and be part of the cabinet, okay? Which are, of course, the unofficial, I guess you would say the official, I should say, advisors to the president. Now, the judicial branch at the national level, there are 9 of them who comprise what are known as the Supreme Court. So 9 justices on the Supreme Court, okay? That's the national level. Now, when you move to the state level, it gets a little bit more complex, a little bit more confusing. We also have a state house and a state senate, but we do not call it Congress, okay? We call it something very different, okay? And for those of you that are just dropping in, for those of you that are just coming into the Zoom session today, there is a there is an assignment for the March 31st Zoom notes that is in your Google Classroom. You're going to want to bring it up. This is it. And we are just kind of filling it out as we go along. And again, there is an activity at the end here. So we've just kind of started this. So if you just dropped in, that's what we're doing here. And you can find this again on the stream. It's the most recent thing that I put in there aside from the Zoom link. And then it is also under week 3 of your assignments. So March 31st Zoom notes. All right, so the state level, and again, it does not, it is not called Congress. It is called the Ohio General Assembly. And again, they have a House and Senate, just like the national government, but they are called collectively the General Assembly. And they are the ones that determine Ohio's state laws, okay? The executive for the state is Mike DeWine, who serves as governor, okay? All throughout the pandemic, your parents may have been having the 2:00 meeting, which they affectionately called Wine with DeWine, just because we were under quarantine as a state all the way through the spring of last year. And of course, we were getting daily updates from him and our director of public health at the time, Amy Acton. Amy Acton has since stepped away, but DeWine is still there with the leaders of the Ohio State Health Department, and they still hold meetings every day where they kind of update us about where the state stands in regards to COVID. But the governor is the one that enforces the law, the one that tells us what the law, how we're going to be following the law within the state of Ohio. The judicial branch at the state level is the state Supreme Court, or the Ohio Supreme Court. There's only minor differences between how the national Supreme Court and the Ohio Supreme Court run, but one of the major ones is how we get our justices on the Supreme Court. At the national level, if you remember, they are selected by the president. The president nominates people, and then the Senate confirms or denies their appointment. Okay, which is why it's so important, because once they are confirmed by the Senate, they are there for life, according to the national government. According to the Constitution of the United States, they serve for life or until they retire. Okay, which is why it's so big that, Trump nominated 3 justices. All of them were in their early 50s or late 40s. So that means that they were fairly young comparative to most people that make it onto the Supreme Court. So bottom line is, let's say they're 52 when they take the bench here and they take a position on the Supreme Court. If they live for 40 more years and are on the Supreme Court the entire time, they lived to 92, they're going to be affecting 40 years of public policy on the Supreme Court, which is a very consequential thing. In Ohio, we don't do it that way. According to the Ohio Constitution, we elect our justices for a specific term of office. We just held an election last year where we did decide 2 of the positions on the Ohio State Supreme Court. One of them stayed in the hands of Justice Sharon Kennedy, who is a Northwest grad, actually. She lives in Hamilton, Ohio. She is currently on the Ohio State Supreme Court. It's an elected position. The other one, Justice French, was removed by vote and replaced by Justice Brunner, because the people of Ohio decided to go a different direction. So we elect our officials on the state Supreme Court. Again, that's because of our Ohio Constitution. Now, at the local level, it's a little different. At the local level, it depends on what your local is. You all live in Colerain Township, or some of you may live in Springfield Township, okay? And a township has what is known as trustees, okay? So a township has a trustee, all right? And again, that's for local ordinances. And the trustees run everything from traffic patterns to how your tax money is allocated for public funds, whether it be to parks, whether it be road maintenance. They're responsible for clearing the snow. So if you're ever kind of driving through, and I'm sure maybe some of you have noticed this, you're driving down, let's say, Hamilton Avenue towards Fairfield. It's snowing, it's icy, it's a little dicey on Hamilton Avenue, and all of a sudden you cross into Fairfield, and maybe the roads are better or worse, and you're kind of like, well, how is that possible? Once you cross over John Gray, you've moved from being in not only Hamilton County in general, but you've moved from being in Colerain Township to now you're in Fairfield, and they have different, snow removal. So just one minor thing right there. But, this can also extend to like your age group. There are curfews involved in Colerain Township. Well, in other townships, they don't. They don't have a curfew, or they have different times. So it just kind of depends on where you're at. Those are all taken care of by the local government, and in your case, township trustees. Now, some of you may have thought that you live in a city. Oh, I live in Cincinnati because my mailing address says I do. You live in Cincinnati according to the post office. Geographically, you live in the metropolitan area of Cincinnati, but you don't live in actual Cincinnati. Now, if you did, you would elect a city council. Okay. The council actually runs the day-to-day operations of a city. They determine where the tax money goes. They determine what the policies and procedures are going to be for the city government. Now, who actually carries them out? In a township, we do not have an executive branch per se. We merely just invest the power and the control in a trustee as well. So the same people that make the rules and the procedures and the ordinances within the township are also the ones that carry them out. Again, because we're just a smaller entity. Now, if we were in a city, you would have a mayor. Cincinnati has Mayor John Cranley. Okay, John Cranley is the one that makes those choices, that carries out those laws at the city level or the local level. When it comes to the judicial branch, we have what are known as municipal courts. This could be anything from you got cited for public intoxication, disturbing the peace. You got arrested by Colerain Township PD for something. Maybe you had a domestic violence call. Now, those are kind of the severe ones that go to municipal courts, but it could also be just as simple as a traffic violation. Some of you may have gotten a ticket before, and they give you the ticket. Well, that also has your court summons. That has your court date on it. Okay, a ticket is technically, for lack of better terminology, a summons to court or a subpoena to show up at court. You can also, in some instances, let's say you get pulled over in Fairfield and they say, hey, you were doing 45 and a 30 or something. They might cite you for speeding. Instead of showing up and actually having the court date, you can actually just go to the Fairfield Justice Center, sign off on it, pay the fine, and move on. So, that's kind of how municipal courts work. Now, they can also handle family court, juvenile court, whatever else. It's just a way of kind of alleviating the court from having to handle all these different things at a state level. Now you have a local level, and that actually kind of parlays us into the changes to the Constitution in 1851. For those of you that don't know, in 1803, Ohio became the 16th state, and they had to have a constitution. Now, some of the problems that we started to see in Ohio all stem from the fact that the people that framed Ohio's constitution did not have a forward-thinking mentality that, number one, the state would be much larger than some of the states that they kind of modeled their constitution after. We modeled our constitution after the Massachusetts Constitution. Well, Massachusetts was decidedly smaller than Ohio. And also, we were going to have a population explosion during the 1800s. Whereas we thought we were kind of going to be a small state with a small population, we ended up being a fairly large state with a fairly large population. So they realized very quickly that they did not plan accordingly to the needs of the state. One of the things they did, and it kind of goes along with what I just talked about, is they created district and by extension over time, municipal courts. They realized that our court system was being overloaded by these small, piddly little court cases that were more local in nature. So they decided to establish local courts and more, shall we say, locally controlled, locally operated courts called district courts. And by extension, like I said, municipal courts. So it kind of divvies up the load of the courts, if you will, and allows for the state Supreme Court to work specifically on court cases that are a little bit larger, that have kind of gone up the line, that have been appealed to the Supreme Court, and not have to decide local issues and problems. Okay, so that's one of the things that they did in 1851, is they created district courts to alleviate the overburdening of the judicial branch. Another one that's very, very controversial is debt limitations. Okay, They basically said, for lack of better terminology, that our government in the state of Ohio has to have a balanced budget, that we cannot spend more than we take in. Now, this is a massive change from the national government because, as you noticed last week when you were looking over our debt clock, you noticed how in debt we really are at the national level. Now, some states have a debt. Some states do actually run into debt because their state constitutions allow them to borrow money and allow them to kind of spend more than they take in. Our state does not. So, for example, the most recent one during COVID, when we first shut down and quarantined at the end of last year, Mike DeWine, who's the governor, took a lot of flack for his proposed budget cuts to education. He basically, during the pandemic, said, "Hey, I got to cut some of the funding that goes to the education within the state," which meant districts like ours had to get rid of some teachers. They had to basically get rid of some programs. They had to find a way to balance their budget because the state was going to spend less money in our district. Now, of course, that brought a lot of criticism. A lot of people said, "I can't believe during this time period that you're cutting money to education." Now, as an educator, it hurt to watch that kind of happen, that there were people that lost their job within the education, within the schools because of these education cuts. But as a history teacher, as a social studies teacher, I understood what he was doing. He had to cut something, and he chose to cut in education because he was able to get away with it, basically. By cutting that education budget, he was able to keep the Ohio State in under budget for the year. He has to do that because, again, they can't borrow money. So if you're not getting tax revenue because businesses were shut down, because people were laid off, and because people were taking more money from our unemployment system in the state of Ohio, because that was costing more money, DeWine realized, well, if I'm spending more money there, I've got to cut it from somewhere else. He chose education, which again is controversial, but not surprising. He has to do it. Again, and there were people, parents and teachers and administrators that were complaining to him, but what they don't realize is if he doesn't cut it from there, he's got to cut it from someplace else. Because that is part of our Constitution. In 1851, we made that change. The other one is executive officials. At the national level, we call these people the cabinet, okay? But executive officials, people like Ohio's Secretary of State, Ohio's Attorney General, Ohio's Treasurer, Ohio's registrar, all these different state offices, okay? The executive officials, the people that help the governor to run the state and run the state departments, they have to be elected by the people. This was a change because prior to this, they were elected by the legislature. Okay, so the General Assembly would elect these people. They would kind of determine who was going to take over as Secretary of State or State Attorney General or State Auditor or whatever else. Well, when these jobs come up now, according to the state constitution, they have to be voted upon. So you get to go and vote for these positions specifically because of the state constitution saying that you get the choice. Now, this causes general problems sometimes because whereas at the national level, Joe Biden steps into office and he gets to nominate his own people to the cabinet. And as long as the Senate confirms them, then he gets his own selected people to run the State Department, to run the the Justice Department, I should say, and other departments of the government, whether it be energy, housing and urban development, or Health and Human Services, all those different departments that are within the federal government, Homeland Security, things like that. All of those are housed under the cabinet, and the president chooses the people that runs those departments. At the state level, it's not how that works. The people choose it. So you could have some awkward situations. Now, it alleviates the possibility of corruption in many cases, but what it does is, let's say DeWine, who's a Republican, has a state attorney general who's a Democrat. Again, he's running the Justice Department within the state of Ohio, and they may be a Democrat. Well, they may be different political parties, and whoever's running the State Department or the Justice Department or whatever else within the state may not agree with the governor and his version of how the state should be run. So it can get a little problematic, to say the least. Okay. Now, turning our attention to the actual activity here, the activity here in the second sheet here, and I'm going to try and make this as visible as I can for all of you here. The activity is giving you scenarios very similar to how the air test will. And this scenario here, the situation, is the council votes to impose a tax for the construction of a new public transit system. Okay. Now, the key here is the council. The council votes to impose a tax for the construction of a new public transit system. Okay. Well, what branch of the government would the council refer to? To do the first one for you here, the town council means that it is a local government and it is a legislative. Okay. So the council would be legislative. That's the branch. And you can abbreviate. You don't have to type out the whole thing. But it would be considered local. Okay. This is a local government thing. Okay. Town council. The second one, the president decides to open trade negotiations with Venezuela. Okay. Now, you can use the chat function to answer, or you can unmute your mic. If we're talking about the branch that is represented here, which branch would it be if the president decides to open trade negotiations with Venezuela? Okay, Jalen chiming in correct. The executive, okay? So the president would be the executive branch. Now, since it's the president, what level? Is it national, state, or local?
National.
It is national. Very good. Okay, so that's the national level. The third one, the assembly passes a bill to limit the tuition a college can charge a student. Well, if it's the assembly, what branch is that? Legislative, very good. Okay, legislative. Okay, and if it's the assembly, we're talking national, state, or local. And feel free to abbreviate here, N, S, or L. You don't have to type out the whole darn thing. All right, state. Okay, state assembly. All right, the Supreme Court finds that the Affordable Care Act is a tax and therefore constitutional. What branch? And you can go E, S, or E, L, or J. Okay, executive, legislative, or judicial. It is judicial. Okay, judicial. And would it be national, state, or local? Okay, again, we can abbreviate if you want. Okay, very good. This would be national because, again, it is the Supreme Court. The Ohio Supreme Court decides to uphold a motion for clemency, which is either a delay or a forgiveness of a death row inmate. Okay, the Ohio State Supreme Court. So, what branch is it? Very good. We're anticipating now. That's important. And since it's Ohio, we know that means state. Okay. The mayor signs into law a new traffic pattern in the downtown utilizing roundabouts. Since it's the mayor, what branch are we talking about? All right, the executive. And are we talking national, state, or local? Okay, it is local. Okay, local. The Congress passes a series of resolutions on climate change. Well, since it's Congress, what branch are we talking about here? Legislative, right? And since it's Congress, what level are we talking about? It is national. Okay. Secretary of State. This one threw people in third and fourth bell. The Secretary of State meets with the leaders of the European Union. It helps to do this backwards. If it's the Secretary of State and they're meeting with leaders of the European Union, what level are we really talking about? National, state, or local? National, that's right, okay? Now, the Secretary of State is part of what organization? If you're running the State Department and you're Secretary of State, what group are you typically lumped in with? DJE? Okay, he is correct. It is the executive because you're lumped into the cabinet, and the cabinet helps the president to run the day-to-day operations of the government. So the executive branch is the correct answer, okay? Say it loud, say it proud next time, DJ. No questions, you're good. All right, the municipal court rules that all traffic violations from a recent snowstorm are pardoned, okay? Well, since it's a court, it's the judicial branch, and the key word here is municipal. So what level are we talking about? It's local, very good. The governor nominates a fellow Republican to the vacancy on the Supreme Court. Now, this is another air test thing that they'll do. They'll put two different branches or represented terms within the same question. What they're really asking is who's taking the action. And since the governor is nominating, they're asking which branch is taking the action. So the governor would be which branch of government? Very good, exec, okay? Executive, and since it's a governor, what level are we talking about? State, very good. The very last one, the assembly passes a bill to replace air tests with a new form of examination, okay? Well, since it's the assembly, what branch are we talking about? Legislative, very good. And level? State. All right. All right. ZWS1IV. Am I correct in saying that you are Varela Sarita? Okay, perfect. I want to make sure I got my my attendance perfect. So, all right, folks. I'm going to stop my share here. All right. So again, that sheet is your grade for the Zoom session. So just kind of complete it and submit it. If you weren't able to do it right away, then try and do it while it's fresh in your mind here, maybe on break here, but you are at the end of the time here. Again, I want to remind people that you have diagnostic quizzes out there. The actual quizzes are not your grade. I got to make sure everybody understands that. The actual quiz scores don't matter. They're participation only. The thing that you have to do is fill out the questionnaire. So when I ask you, what did you score on the economics test, or what did you score on the amendments quiz? You just report your score, and then underneath the actual grade is telling me where you are confused. Okay, now some of you have been scoring really well. Like I know many of you scored really well on the amendments one, okay? And then you didn't mark anything underneath because you're like, well, I got 49 out of 53. I'm doing all right. You know, that's fine. If you feel like you have a really good grasp on it, then that's totally fine. You're totally cool with that. My thing is make sure that if you do score poorly, and we expect you to score poorly on a few of these, you know, you haven't done any Ohio government really throughout the year. So if the local government stuff, I had somebody in Third Bell was like, man, I scored a 0. Like, yeah, well, you haven't covered any of it. So we totally understand that. So again, you're taking these quizzes and trying your best, but the main thing is you're then filling out the questionnaire and clicking off the things that you found confusing. This helps us to understand. And many of you have been doing this great. And many of you have noticed if you do that, you automatically get 50 points. So what you score on the actual quizzes, it doesn't matter. It's how you fill it out and assess yourself afterwards. That's what you're getting the grade for. If you don't fill out the questionnaire, you're not getting the credit for the assignment. So fill out that questionnaire in Google Forms for each one of those. And again, there are 3 of them. So you're talking about 150 total points that some of you are leaving on the table because you're not doing the diagnostic quizzes. You also, in each one of the weeks, the past 3 weeks, have had a separate assignment. You had modern civil rights, which was asking you about reparations, amongst other things. You had an assignment over playing a game called Chair the Fed and a budget activity. And many of you did the game, but you didn't watch the budget video and answer the question, so you're getting half credit at best. So if that's one of you, then go back, redo the assignment, and turn it back in. And then this week, you had an assignment over local government that Ms. J put together, who is Ficker's student teacher, just trying to teach you the Ohio Constitution and some of the things that are involved in it. All 3 of those assignments were 50 points apiece. There's another 150 points. You're talking about 300 total points right there that some of you are just kind of leaving out there as zeros because you're refusing to log in and do them. Do them as soon as possible, because as soon as we hit the air test, those all go away, because there's no point in doing the air test diagnostics once the air test is done. So please make sure that you use the time for the rest of this week or even over spring break to finish them up, because once we hit the air test, they're permanent zeros. The other things, you had Zoom calls, small little 20 or 25 point things like the one I just went over. Do those and turn those in. Those are given credit, so please make sure that you're doing those. The final thing on there is a primary source quiz where I'm asking you to read through some primary sources and do the quiz. I did a Zoom call with students yesterday. Many of you were in person to do that, and you automatically got at least 58, 56, something like that out of 60, because you paid attention as we were going through and you filled it out as we went. The video of that session is online, is on your Google Classroom. So if you bring up the video of it on YouTube and you bring up your quiz at the same time, you should get a really good quiz score just based on going through and marking down your answers. Okay, so again, please don't leave these points out there, because you have roughly 400 points assigned to you prior to spring break. It's going to be very difficult for you to make up for that when we hit the financial literacy after spring break and the personal political platform. I've taken you over your time now, and I apologize, but some of you were kind of straggling in late because we technically start, I start at noon, but many of you were coming in about 12:05, 12:10. So let's see if we can't fix that after spring break. You don't have many Zoom sessions left. So again, on Wednesdays, try and make it back by noon for this class. If you have any questions, obviously reach out through email or through Zoom. Other than that, have a great day and a wonderful spring break. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you after spring break.